Ну, начинаем. Забудьте включить звук. Окей. Постоянно забываю, когда за комп сажусь. Управление VAST плюс LKM. Немного кнопок.
Hi there. Thank you very much for playing the Beginner's Guide. My name is Davey Reedon. I wrote The Stanley Parable, and while that game tells a pretty absurd story, today I'm going to tell you about a series of events that happened between
Сука, высрите
2008 and
субтитры.
2011. We're going to look at the games.
Охуенная игра по типу Stanley Parable, где чел просто пиздит и пиздит, пиздит и пиздит, пиздит и пиздит, пиздит и пиздит.
Made by a friend of mine named
Пусть
Coda.
пиздит.
Now these games mean a lot to me. I met Coda in early 2009 at a time when I was really struggling with some personal stuff, and his work pointed me in a very powerful direction. I found it to be a good reference point for the kinds of creative works that I wanted to make. So just to start you off, this is, I think, the first game he ever made. It's a level for Counter-Strike. You can walk around here, by the way. And mostly it's just Coda learning the basics of building a 3D environment. But what I like is that even though he starts from the simple aesthetic of a desert town, he then scatters these colorful abstract blobs and impossible floating crates around the level. And of course, it destroys the illusion that this actually is a desert town, and instead this level becomes a kind of calling card from its creator. It's like a reminder that this video game was constructed by a real person. And it kind of makes you wonder, what was going through his head as he was building this? This is what I like about all of Coda's games. I mean, not that they're all fascinating as games, but that they are all going to give us access to their creator. I want us to see past the games themselves. I want to get to know who this human being really is. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So, it's 2008, Coda starts making these games, and he never releases any of them. He doesn't put them onto the internet, he just makes them and then immediately abandons them, and they sit on his computer forever. And I think he really understood this image of himself as a recluse. At one point, he jokingly renamed his computer's recycling bin to Important Games Folder. So, you know, this was just how he worked. He tended to crank them out one after the other without even really pausing to try to understand what he had just made, until suddenly one day, he just stopped. In 2011, that was it. He made his last game, and then he hasn't made another one since. And that's why I've taken this opportunity to gather all of his work together, is because I find his games powerful and interesting, and I'd like this collection to reach him, to maybe encourage him to start creating again. And if the people like you who play this also happen to find his work interesting, then I'm sure it'll just send that much stronger of a message of encouragement to Coda. So thanks for joining me on this. If you have a particular interpretation that I haven't mentioned here, or if you just need to get in touch, you can email me at daveyWreden@gmail.com. Okay, that's about it for introduction. Let's take a look at Coda's first proper game. As each game is loading, I'll show you the date that it was completed. This first one was made in November 2008.
Охуенная игра про то, как один чувак делал игры и не доделывал их, и другой чувак узнал о них и решил релизнуть их по-своему.
This game is called Escape from Whisper, and it's one of the more
Наезд,
generic games you'll see from Coda.
А тут субтитры появились. Спасибо, бля. Очень вовремя. Типа на интро, где ты объясняешь вообще, что это за высер, ты решил не добавлять субтитры. А здесь надо, бля.
Security call reached. Hostile alien life form inbound.
Выглядит красиво.
It kinda looks like this game was abandoned mid-development. For instance, you have this gun, which you'd think would indicate that there are supposed to be monsters or enemies somewhere, but then clearly there are no enemies anywhere. You can't even reload the gun when you run out of bullets. But ultimately we don't really know. Maybe Coda thought that actually it was complete the way that it is. And I think that we should talk about his games for what they are, rather than for what they're not.
Enemy force neutralized. Begin shift evacuation.
Перезарядиться действительно нельзя. Он просто картинку натянул, что ли, в квадрат.
Apparently this space station has a labyrinth on it. Sure, I don't know. There's really no reason for it that I've ever been able to discern, so in the interest of time, I'm just gonna skip you on past it.
Спасибо.
Okay, this is the part that's interesting. The game has this narrative about the whisper machine and how it has to be turned off, and then you get to the engine room.
Hey, you there, in the engine room. You could save us all. That beam is powering the whisper machine. We could disrupt it by introducing a great enough heat signature. If your body could stop the beam. It's so much to ask, but for all of our lives, would you do it? Could you give yourself?
Let me pause here for a second. What you just experienced, stepping into the beam and then dying, is probably what Coda had initially intended when he was developing this level. But when he first compiles and plays it, something goes wrong. There's a bug somewhere. And this is what happens instead. The beam causes you to start floating. And this is an important moment for him. Because yes, this is technically a glitch, but Coda identifies something human about it, like how small it makes you feel in the face of this larger chaotic system. Or this floating could be the afterlife, a peaceful place, juxtaposed against all of the hysteria that you've just had to traverse. I don't even know. I have no idea what he was thinking, but what's clear is that after making this, something lodges itself in his brain. He wants to do more of these really weird and experimental designs. So he stops work on this and moves on to a stream of tiny little games that go in all sorts of directions. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first game he made after leaving this one behind.
Ну, типа, он не делал игры, он делал уровни. Просто как будто папаша начал делать игры. Я бы не назвал это играми, это просто уровни. Я не могу ходить. Могу...
In this game, you can only walk backwards.
Прошлое было позади нее. Только назад. Это прикольно.
So it's a short and relatively minimalist experiment combining motion and narrative. It is less advanced than the previous game, but actually it seems to be more focused, more complete. Coda's trying to give it a unique voice rather than simply basing it on a pre-existing trope.
Чё? А, я не туда пошел. Но если будущее всегда позади, как она находит в себе силы встретить его лицом к лицу.
It's a short little thought. It says what it wants to say, and then it ends.
Это
Didn't need
прикольно.
anything more than that.
У меня аж мурашки
Which to me
пошли.
is why it works.
Реально.
Because
Ну,
it gets
на
out
вебке
quick.
не видно, наверное.
Okay, next one.
Волосы встали. Так, тут, наверное, можно нормально ходить. Сейчас ты входишь...
And that's it.
Вот и
Okay,
все.
the meaning of this game won't be clear just yet. please be patient with me for a few more games and I promise you'll see what makes it interesting. Oftentimes, Coda would put bizarre titles like this one at the start of his games. I wish I'd known him at the time that he was making these early games. He would really only talk to me about his work as he was making it. Once he stopped work on a game, like, that was it. It was dead to him. And I don't agree with that at all, but what are you gonna do? Once you've been slowed to an absolute crawl, the door at the top of the stairs opens. So why, if Coda's not showing these games to anyone, why bother opening the door at all? Well, to show you, I'm modifying the game here so that when you press enter, it'll bring you back up to full speed so you can enter the door for yourself. A room that's warm and nice and filled with little ideas for games. Coda would often tell me that he didn't mind if people thought of him as cold or distant. He said
Ой, бля, чувствую,
that
зря я
he was
запустился
actually a
сегодня.
vibrant and compassionate person, but that it takes time to really see that. It can be a very slow climb to get there.
Что, он делал игры 3 года всего? Если в 11-м он перестал.
Well, this is new for Coda. It's an actual puzzle. Go ahead and see if you can solve it. Don't forget that solution, because we're going to see this puzzle again soon. We're gonna see it a lot.
В Майнкрафт, вот это да, это как будто уровни в Майнкрафте, но тогда еще не было Майнкрафта, или был. Возможно, потом он
So
начал...
that seems to be it, right? You walk down a corridor, you solve a puzzle, you get to the end. Simple enough. All right, now I'm going to modify the game again so that when you press enter, it'll remove all of the walls from this room.
Ну не все стены.
How about that? There was more to it than we had any way of knowing. I actually find it funny that this game comes after the Stairs game, since they essentially convey the opposite idea. So, in the Stairs game, a dull exterior concealed a rich interior. And then, in this level, a dull interior hides this fantastic outer world. Either way, I think that the point is the same, is that most of the time you don't get to know what you're missing, or even that you're missing anything. That's not your role as a player. So if your role here is not to understand, then what is it?
Фурировали. Меня опять сюда закинули.
Aha. So this, combined with the entering game from earlier, tells us that Coda believes his games are connected somehow. It could even be that the stairs game and the puzzle game are literally connected in between this and the entering game. There's a bigger picture that all of his games are meant to play a role in, some larger meaning that we won't be able to grasp until we've seen all of them. And once we have, we can step back and start to understand what exactly that bigger picture is.
Большое прекрасное нисхождение. Ух, ю. Это выглядит тоже красиво. Я летаю? Нет, я хожу.
Let's talk about video game development for a second. Every video game runs on what's called an engine, which determines what the game can and cannot do. So in other words, the engine is a set of tools for game development. To make all of these games, Coda is using an engine called Source. Like all engines, Source has certain things that it does well, and it has certain things that it does poorly. One of the things that it does very well is boxy linear corridors. That's why so many of Coda's games are set in these large, flat, empty rooms, is just because he's working with what the engine does well. The tools available to the creator shape what kinds of creative work they're going to end up making. You might consider paying attention to the architecture in Coda's games to notice how they seem to stem from an engine that's very good at producing linear, boxy corridors.
Ух, ю.
This prison, funny enough, in Coda's original design, the doors stayed shut for a full hour before letting you go.
Целый час.
If you don't mind, I think we're gonna skip that. This is something that he and I used to argue about a lot. You know, whether a game ought to actually be playable, whether it means anything if no one can get through it. And I would always defend that, you know, all this work goes into the game, why not make it playable and accessible? And so we just got into heated arguments over it, and there was one time that after one of these conversations, he went home, and a day or two later, he sent me a zip file entitled Playable Games that was full of hundreds of individual games, each of which was just an empty box that you walked around in and nothing else. Believe me, I played every single one of those just to find out if there was like a gag hidden somewhere. There wasn't.
И он реально в этом копался и играл. Жесть у него времени.
It's the puzzle again, with the exact same solution as the last time. There's still no clear indication of what makes this puzzle so special that Coda is going to return to it over and over. But I promise I'll share with you my interpretation very shortly. Here, Coda begins using a kind of dialogue system that he fashioned out of the engine's chat capabilities. Use the 1, 2, 3 buttons on your keyboard to respond.
Мне надо выбрать правильное решение, правильный порядок ответов.
And so we make one last descent down to the final floor of the level. It's a lamppost. Okay, I can't tell you quite why, but for some reason, Coda fixates on this lamppost. It's going to appear at the end of every single one of his games from here on out. I'll tell you what I think. I think that up to this point, you know, he's been making really strange and abstract games with no clear purpose, and maybe you can only float around in that headspace for so long. Because now he wants something to hold on to. He wants a reference point. He wants the work to be leading to something. He wants a destination, which is what this lamppost is. It's a destination. We're gonna see it in the work as well. His games are just gonna become a lot more cohesive, a lot more fully developed, with more of a clear idea behind them. And as we go, that idea will get clearer and clearer and clearer.
Эта игра подключена к интернету. Блаждаю, тут там можно оставлять заметки. Все заметки вокруг оставлены другим игрокам. Ага. Окей. Я ничего с этим не могу сделать.
So first off, I'm sure you can deduce this, but this game is not connected to the internet. All of the notes that you're gonna see have been written by Coda. This was actually the first game of his that I ever played. This was shortly after I met him at a weekend game jam in Sacramento, where I grew up. I saw him working on this very level, and it was just so different from anything that anyone else was doing. So right away I was like, I have to be friends with this person. In retrospect, I think I was probably a bit too pushy, trying to get his attention. I was over-enthusiastic. But he was very gracious about it and very patient with me. And I cooled off eventually. Feel free to skip over any of these notes if they're not doing anything for you. Nothing extra is gonna happen if you read all of them. Either way, to me they convey a sense of loneliness. I see this person who's filled with thoughts and feelings and beliefs and has no way to express them except as scattered and unheard voices in a game that wasn't meant to be played. But it's ironic, isn't it, that in playing this game and seeing how alone Coda often felt, that we get to know him better and actually kind of connect with him. And I have to be honest with you, this idea is really seductive to me. That I could just play someone's game and see the voices in their head and get to know them better and have to do less of the messy in-person socializing. I could just get to know you through your work. I think this is why I always liked Coda's games so much, is because it felt like they let me have that connection. I felt as though he was inviting me personally into his world. And then I feel less lonely too.
Звук прикольный в этих сообщениях. Стой. Еще стой. Стой, развернись. Впереди только беды. Идущего человека? Я не видел никого. Тут вообще нет смысла. Пуп. Пуп. Творец путь. Только вместо плесени тут, видимо, диалоговые эти записки.
At the end of this level, we're going to see the puzzle again. And here, I'll tell you what I think the puzzle means. Each of these games represents an idea that was on Coda's mind at the time that he was making it. And the puzzle is a way of closing the door on a previous chapter of his life before moving on to the next one. In each of his games, after exploring a theme that, you know, he might find
просто не дает мне
difficult,
говорить.
Coda can then place this puzzle that he knows has a reliable solution, he understands exactly how it works, and so it gives him a simple mechanism for moving on. And because there's this dark area between the doors, a space between spaces, before you move on, you get to pause. Just for a moment, a few seconds to reflect on and let go of the events that led you here. To step back and connect the pieces together. To grasp at that elusive bigger picture.
Чисто Стэнли Кубрик момент. Как тут без занят. Мне кажется, он кукухой поехал. Порнозвезды тоже умирают.
It's gonna kind of just spin its own wheels for a few minutes. Hang with it.
Да я что, на кастинге, на порно-кастинге? Я все сажусь на диван. Что мне, начать теребить? Или сами начнете? Каков план? О! А, дверь была открыта. Вау. Ну, выглядит красиво. Это без рейтрейсинга. Тебе не нужна карта за 120 тысяч рублей, чтобы это видеть. Можно нормальное освещение без рейтрейсинга высрать, если постараться. Или тут есть рейтрейсинг? Да нет. О.
See, like, this is it. The whole game. And there's nothing that's particularly interesting about it. You just walk to the end of a hallway. Except, for some reason, Coda gets really fixated on this prison that has all of this modern furniture. And I don't know why, but he decides he needs to revisit this prison. He's gonna start over, use the same assets, turn it into something else. Okay, cool. Here's version 2.
Версия 2 что-то потеряла. Что из мебели должно быть в центре комнаты? Ставь гигантскую дыру. Ну что это? «10 печек» ряд вдоль стены, майнкрафтеры поймут. Мне кажется... Кажется, я должен к двери подойти. Столы были изобретены в 1935 году. 1935. Это фэк.
There's a bit more to this one, but still, it's not really communicating anything. It's kind of just weird for weirdness' sake. So, okay, he throws it out and starts over. This time he comes at the prison idea from a different direction.
Да, давайте вообще ничего не делать ручками и все заставим рассчитывать автономно. Автоматизация — это же охуительно. С помощью автоматизации можно делать столько продукции, которая нахуй никому не нужна, и потом наебывать людей экономикой и пытаться им продать то, что им нахуй не нужно, потому что мы же наделали, потому что у нас куча автоматизации. Вау, damn, let's go. Для начала нажмите, в смысле нажмите. Хорошо, подойдите к фотографии в раме и слегка поверните ее вправо. Теперь выключите торшер в этой комнате и включите его. Наконец, коснитесь пола. Вот и все, в реальной тюрьме теперь открылся выход. Вернитесь к началу, чтобы вновь перенестись в тюрьму. А где начало? Где начало?
And of course, now the table is gone and you can't begin the chain of events to escape.
Че?
Here's a version where there are no bars, but you can't actually get to the well. And then a version where the inside of the prison is the outside and the outside is the inside. Let me just blink you real quick through a few more of these. I mean, he really unloaded on this prison idea. There's nearly a dozen of them. Personally, I think it's awful to watch this, to see a person basically unraveling through their work. And for what? Like, at what point do you just go, maybe there are game ideas other than this prison that I could be working on? But Coda doesn't have that voice telling you to stop, that particular mechanism of defense against yourself. Without it, you just spiral. And so he keeps going and going and going and going and going, and then he hits on something. And he likes it. And that's it. He's done. He stops making prisons. This is the very last version of the prison game that he created. And the reason I think it works is that the prison is not actually in it.
Алло, кто это? Это я это ты после бегства из тюрьмы. Ты это я? Так ты тоже была в этой тюрьме?
It's a conversation. And so this is what Coda wants, is to be able to talk to someone, to share what's on his mind, and to get some good advice from someone who knows. But the irony is that even in this scenario, you're still talking to yourself. You know, all of these games so far are Coda talking to himself. I can see why he considers this a fitting conclusion to the prison games. After all of the obsession and frustration, just to be told by someone you can trust that things are going to be okay. Wouldn't that be nice? So what would it look like if Coda wanted to make a game about talking to someone other than himself?
Красивые локации он делал.
To me, this environment is meant to represent Coda's puzzle, with the two doors on either side and a dark transitional space between. You'll notice that the quality of the art is a step up from previous games, including this new and improved chat system, which he started using from this point on. From here on out, he begins putting much more effort into the visual polish of his work, and this particular game took 2 months to create as a result.
Спальня где тут был? Ну, нет. Где книги? Стоп. Опять убрать
After
посуд.
the intense set of prison games, this house cleaning level almost feels like cleansing. It's the moment after a particularly difficult or traumatic experience where you just need to let it sit and digest inside of you, and eventually cohere into something meaningful. I know that Coda really liked this game. Of all of his work, actually, this was the only one that he called me up to ask me to come over and look at it. This was during a period of a few months where he was like grossly happy all the time, just walked around with a constant smile on his face.
Дедовщина.
I'm glad he made this. I'm glad he found some peace.
Нет, на пол.
But, of course, it can't last. The music stops, your companion is gone, it's time to leave. The door at the top of the hill is now open as well. Again, you can't stay in the dark space for too long. You just can't. You have to keep moving. It's how you stay alive.
Фонарь.
Which is the whole point of the puzzle doors, right? That sooner or later you have to pick up and move. I really thought that was the point of it.
Мне кажется, в конце он реально
This
Genshin
one
Impact
gets a
сделает.
bit goofy.
Без усилий.
About halfway through the game, the perspective shifts. And you play as the teacher. And suddenly, you discover that your teacher is just as bigoted and afraid as you are. Oh, and also you can move around the classroom now.
Ничто и никто.
I fell pretty hard for this one. I feel like it's one of the most relatable experiences that you can have. To assume that some other person is perfect and totally fulfilled in every way, and completely miss all of the little flaws that make them painfully human. I think about this game a lot these days. This one took a lot longer than all the others for Coda to make. It was 4 months between this and the last one. That's twice as long as it took him to make any other game before this, and it's not like it's particularly complex, so I remember I found that a little strange at the time.
Тут он преодолевает боязнь сцены. Или боязнь публики. Это, блин, хорошая тема. Хорошо, представление начинается по местам. В этой сцене ты будешь играть меня. Бывали навстречу настоящих профессионалов. Ты стоишь, прислонившись к этой стене. Прислоняюсь. Отлично, так и стой. Вон та женщина в кресле. Она профессиональный фотограф-анималист. А твоя заветная мечта стать таким же профессионалом сегодня твой единственный шанс чему-нибудь у нее научиться, чтобы знать, добиться успеха. Давай, обратись к ней, скажи что-нибудь. Привет. И привет, и это все. Но это ведь не диалог. Тебе нужно вступить с ней в диалог по-человечески. Попробуй еще раз. Вот все мои надежды и мечты. Это совсем не то, что я ей сказал. Ты совершенно не чувствуешь тональность беседы. Я была скована, но знала, чего хочу, я была уверена в себе. Не знаю почему, но это было ненадолго, но я чувствовала уверенность в себе. Возможно, тебе нужно лучше почувствовать атмосферу, вокруг нас очень много людей, я поставлю в помощь конусы, которые отталкивают, если их коснуться. Мне нравится музыка, которая наигрывается сама. Нет! Верните конус. Мне было весело. Я впервые не загонялся от происходящего в этой игре, когда игрался с конусами. Это Курама, что ли? Я буду сидеть за решеткой?
The solution to social anxiety, to fears of having to perform and having to chase success, the answer for Coda is to withdraw, to hide himself away. Which is what leads to scenarios like the stairs that slowed you down several games ago, where it just becomes harder and harder to access Coda's inner landscape because he keeps retreating. He just keeps backing away from possible connections to anyone other than himself. And to be honest, I didn't consider it very healthy when I first played this game. You know, it looked to me like he was trying to justify the idea of just disconnecting yourself from the world. And that wasn't what I wanted for him or for his games. Because I feel like a lot of his games are inviting me to connect with this person, to bring him closer. But what can you do? After this, Coda went off and took another 5 months to make a new game.
Дорожная лента Мёбиус. В эту игру следует играть с закрытыми глазами. Нажмите, чтобы начать игру. Ладно, я закрыл. Я даже пруфану. Так, еще. Guess это фейк. С открытыми играть?
You should probably open your eyes if you haven't already. It's pretty much impossible to solve otherwise. And there is a solution, by the way.
Там и фонарь был. Да никак не могу добраться до фонаря, у меня нет ничего. А, вон дверь. Не способ это остановить, сказать правду. Это не было правдой? Да, именно так, это правда.
Like I said, I was getting concerned. First off, He's never been this explicit in his work about exactly what he's thinking. So where's that coming from? But then even weirder, his work has potentially stopped being an outlet for him. Not like he's having trouble iterating on ideas, but he literally just can't think of new ideas anymore. And in person, he was being a lot more distant than usual. Like, you know how sometimes a person will just deflect anything that you say in order to keep themselves disconnected all the time? It was that kind of thing. Here was the point in my relationship with Coda where I really started to wonder if he needed my help in some way. His games are going to get more desperate from here on out. After this game, it's almost 6 months before he finishes something new.
Да, надеюсь, это история без драмы в конце. Типа он стал нормальным челом, перестал перекрываться. Что это?
If the last game featured Coda talking explicitly about his creative frustrations, this one turns it up to 11. Now, put yourself in my shoes playing this. Here's a friend whose work is exhibiting signs of struggle, frustration, anxiety, depression, even. And yet, still, he keeps making games. He keeps throwing himself into the grinder even when he clearly doesn't have the energy for it anymore. Why? What is it for? Because from my perspective at the time and just what I knew of him, this was a result of how isolated he was. He was in his own little bubble, just sitting at his computer all day, not really showing these games to anyone, not releasing them onto the internet, and so he didn't have anyone outside of himself to connect with. He had no outlet to ground himself on. You can't talk yourself out of loneliness. It doesn't work that way. You can't be the one writing both the questions and the answers. Then there's no movement. Then there's no circulation. If all of your anxieties are being channeled into your work, then if the work ever fails, you have no backup and you're just going to crash. Seeing this game at the time that he made it, it looked really unhealthy to me. I was watching him do this to himself, and I hated it. I hated seeing him so trapped. It's like, video games are not worth this amount of suffering. This is someone I really cared about, and I used to get so much joy out of seeing him create. For him to suddenly become angry and frustrated like this was the worst thing for me. I don't know. This is what I felt at the time. I don't know how else to explain it. I wanted it to stop more than anything. I had never felt so rotten. I needed more than I had ever needed anything for this to stop. But it didn't stop. After finishing this one, Coda takes another 7 months and comes up with a new game.
Машина. Я пью масло и хожу по дороге. Охранник. В плен машину ждем, вас можешь начать допрос в любой момент. Она называет себя Кода. Сударыня. Ну чё, падла?
And of course, it's the machine.
У нее компьютер, может, сломался. Друзья мои. Блин, ну уничтожать ничего не хотелось бы, но тут только два варианта: уничтожить и уничтожить. Я готов. Врубайте свет.
So now the work is becoming self-destructive. And I'll tell you, at the time that I first played this game, shortly after he made it, here's what I'm thinking to myself. I'm thinking that Code is stuck in his own head, and that it's having a very negative effect on him, and that all he needs to do is just start showing his work to people, to get some actual feedback on his games. It might get him out of isolation. And so, as I'm thinking this, I realize that I could be the one to initiate it. Because it would never occur to Coda to start actively soliciting feedback, so what if I did it for him? If he could see the difference it would make to have more actual conversations with other human beings, would that bring him out of his mental spiral? Would it give him confidence in himself? Would it bring meaning back into his work? So I started showing Coda's work to people. I took this one, and the islands which you just played, the theater, the notes, the house cleaning game, and some of the prison escape games. I brought them to people that I knew and trusted. I asked their opinions. And the great part is that they really loved his games. You know, the point of it all was just to give him some external reference point, but they genuinely loved his work. There was nothing for him to be afraid of.
Пусти оружие. Хорошо.
Can you see why I felt like this was the right thing to do? Because it's the thing that I always feel like I need, to be told that my work is good, that I am good. When someone really connects with a thing that I've made, when they see themselves purely in my work, there's nothing that feels better. And I got to give that very same feeling to my friend. I did something... I really felt like I'd done something good, like I was a good person. I felt like there was a friend who was in trouble and was unhappy and maybe didn't like themselves, and I could fix it. If I could give him this gift, maybe I could fix the problem. When they told me how much they enjoyed his games, it was the best feeling. It was the absolute best feeling. It made me feel so happy. So beautifully, beautifully happy.
No.
So anyway, Coda finishes this game, and then really he just kind of takes off for a while. So this is June of 2011, and I didn't hear anything from him for several weeks, I guess. And so out of nowhere, one day I get an email, and it's got a private link to a new game of Coda's. This one is called The Tower, and to my knowledge, it's the last game that Coda ever made. So let's take a look. And this is where I have trouble saying anything meaningful about Coda's work. Because more than anything else, the tower just feels distant. It feels like it's trying to distance itself from the world. It's a very cold game. This room actually has a maze in it. Except that all the walls of the maze are invisible. And then every time you touch one of the walls, there's this awful flashing and noise, so the experience is really miserable.
Это
The game
правда.
goes beyond not being meant to be played, it actually seems to despise the player for trying to play it at all.
Унизить того,
But I
кто
do want
играет.
to show you the rest of the levels, so when you're ready to continue, press enter and I'll put a bridge over the maze.
Капец, это как будто про Миядзаки. Тот самый человек, который делает игры не чтобы
And to be
развлечь, а
fair,
чтобы
it's not like this
издеваться.
is the first game that's needed some modification to be playable. Like the house cleaning game. You know, that one used to actually loop the cleaning chores and you just cleaned a house forever. I had to cut it off so that you could exit the house and the game would actually end. But that game had an idea that it was actually trying to communicate. What's the deeper idea behind the invisible maze? The only way past this challenge is to randomly guess the 6-digit code. Like the invisible maze, it's frustrating to me, because it's the opposite of everything else that Coda has made. It doesn't encourage thought or engagement. It doesn't ask anything of me, except a lot of my time. If I could have reached him during this time, then maybe I could have asked him, but I couldn't. I still don't really understand why this is here. I'll put the code on the ground for you here, though, so that we can move on.
Он начал рофлить над теми, кто рофлил над ним, видимо. Ну или пытается рофлить.
The switch to open this door is actually on the other side of the door, meaning that it's literally impossible to solve from this side. So even if you somehow brute forced your way through the first two challenges and you got to this point, there's actually just no way to progress. And it's scary for me, the idea of Coda cutting himself off entirely, just saying, you know, that's it, that's the end of the conversation, not giving me any way to fix the problem. I feel like a failure, I guess, when I can't fix the problem. But I can open this door for you, so let me do that.
Но он угорает над этим челом, который рассказывает про игру. Он общается с ним.
I don't know why I would be. It's not like everything needs to have a solution, but I feel it somehow. I feel like I failed, and I don't understand why.
Потому что тебя рофлят, чел.
It's June of 2011. I'm playing this for the very first time, and as I'm playing, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know this person. I have no idea who this person is.
Вот, он просто придумал себе.
It wasn't the guy I knew. It wasn't my friend.
Ты
I had
все
come
это
to so many
выдумал.
conclusions from looking at all of his work up to this point, and then suddenly none of them. I had been trying to, though. That was the thing. For years, I was trying to get to know him, to understand who he actually was and what he stood for. I asked him so many times to please just tell me what his games mean to him. I asked him please to tell me what the 3 dots mean. And he wouldn't.
Жесть. Его просто жестко пранканули.
I just felt so strongly that if I could have connected with him, that if I could have somehow made his work my own, that I would finally be once and for all happy. It was that I needed to see myself in someone else. I needed to be someone other than me.
Или это он, но с биполяркой.
And it felt somehow like I had failed. Where did I screw up?
Дорогой Дэви, благодарю за интерес к моим играм.
That you stopped making games, aren't I? It's because of what I did. I poisoned it for you.
Это все рофл, я не верю, это рофл. Это прикол, это провокация ради рофла. Порой я гадаю.
But when I took your work and I was showing it to people, it actually felt... It felt as though I were responsible for something important and valuable.
Но ты оказался выдумщик, энтузиаст. Глупышка. Ты настолько заполнил мое личное пространство, что нужно прям начал.
People who played them, they treated me like I was important. They really listened and cared about what I had to say. Even though I was showing your work, it was... I felt good about myself. Finally. For a moment, while I had that, I liked myself.
Ну, блин, это 2 разраба просто рофлят друг над другом.
And then you stopped. And I didn't have anything left to show people. I just had to be with myself. And as soon as that happened, there was no feeling at all. Nothing. Less than nothing. What does that mean?
Не вызывает у меня подавленности спада, это просто часть процесса, согласен. Чтобы выше взлететь, нужно сильнее разогнаться при падении. Говорит о тебе, чем обо мне. Это тоже правда. Я осознаю, что сейчас все это для тебя еще лишено смысла. И это нормально, это не моя проблема, не мне ее решать. Очень надеюсь, что однажды что-то в тебе щелкнет, и ты примиришься с тем, с чем сейчас сражаешься. Да ты наконец-то поймешь, о чем я говорю. Но, блин, играться с чувствами людей — это всегда прикольно, и не говори ничего. Выводить на эмоции — это абьюзивные отношения, но, блин, такова человеческая натура. Не понял, где рычаг? А, точно.
That's why I'm releasing this collection of your work. Is because I haven't been able to find any other way to reach you. I've tried everything. And so a part of me has hope that if I put this compilation out into the world, and if I put my name on it, that maybe enough people will play it so that it'll find its way to you, so that I can tell you that I'm sorry. I know I screwed up. If I apologize to you truly and deeply, will you start making games again? Please. I need to feel okay with myself again. And I always felt okay as long as I had your work to see myself in. I mean, is something wrong with me? Because I know that I did an awful thing, and I'm doing it again right now. Like, I'm showing people your work, but I can't stop myself from doing it. That's how badly I need to feel something again, like I'm an addict. There has to be something wrong with me. Can I apologize? What if I tell you I was wrong? Will that work? Will that fix it? I don't know. I don't think it will, but there's nothing else that I can do. Just tell me what you want. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please, start making games again. Please help me. Please give me some of whatever it is that makes you complete. I want whatever that wholeness is that you just summoned out of nothing and you put into your work. You were complete in some way that I never was. And I want to know I want to know how to be a good person. I want to know how not to hate myself. Please. I'm fading, and all I want is to know that I'm going to be okay.
Она крашнулась или что? У меня моргнул курсор, и все. Ок. Чё, Казанский вокзал? Чё за говно где-то вот? Не знаю. Вот этому челу, который визжит, ему реально надо в доту поиграть, пообщаться, поставить против Арсения на миду, почитать сообщения от Арсения. Вот ты напиши этому разрабу, Арсений, скажи, вызови его 1 на 1 на миду и объясни ему за жизнь, в чем он не прав, в чем он плох, как он ужасен, и что ему надо помыться, сходить после игры, потому что он вонючий, потный хуй. Это чел какой-то тепличный. Но либо он рофлит, либо он иронизирует сам над тем, что он тепличный. И тут непонятно, это мета или, блядь, постмодерн. Мне так впадло, блядь. Я не буду вообще о КТ ты говоришь. Что такое КТ? О чем? Ну тут типа рассматривается проблема взаимоотношений двух людей. Или скорее всего даже самокопание проблема. Наверное. Я вообще уверен, что это он. Ну все его. Абсолютно все. Он выдумал коду или так далее. Я уверен, что есть огромный пост на Reddit вообще, где люди обсуждают и делятся, и он его открывает и начинает тереть свои соски о том, что там пишут люди по поводу рассуждений своих на эту игру. Потому что людям нечего делать. Им нужно что-то делать. И они делают то, что считают нужным.
Solution. 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 I guess if someone had told me ahead of time that he just really enjoyed making prison games, maybe I wouldn't have thought he was so desperate. I wouldn't have told so many people that he was depressed. Maybe he just likes making prisons.
Ты играешь за Христа. Нет, я играю за контртеррориста на меншине.
Even now, the disease is telling me to stop. Don't show people what a shitty person you are. They'll hate you.
О, где-то в этом есть такая заброшенная деревня или как-то, или жилой комплекс, там, где тоже песок внутри зданий. Я боюсь тебе говорить, Арсений. Над тобой, кажется, угарнули. Да почему? Ну, проходя Стэнли Парейбл, я тоже думал, что за говно я делаю, почему я этим занимаюсь. Но Стэнли Парейбл мне понравился. Что будет?
Strange, but the thought of not being driven by external validation is unthinkable. Like, I actually cannot conceive of what that would be like.
Бля, ну красивое. Вот иногда прям пиздец красиво. О! Само. Тут ничего не было. Жесть.
What now?
Что теперь? Не, ну количество мурашек в этой игре, оно достаточно большое. Музон охуительный. И иногда вот всякие эти... графоуни приколы.
And I'm sorry, because I know that I said that I would be here and I would walk you through this, but I'm starting to feel like I have a lot of work to do. I have a lot that I need to make up for, and so I'm just gonna...
Что уже пора. Я бы посоветовал ему еще землю толкнуть раз 10. Потому что все вот это напряжение, депрессии и так далее, оно все копится в шейном отделе, в плечах. Поэтому иногда нужно просто толкнуть землю раз 10, чтобы она не остановилась хотя бы для тебя одного. О чем думают парни после дрочки? Вот это, кстати, хорошая локализация названия игры. Для ру-сегмента, так сказать, чтобы было более понятно. Simulator of guys after jerking off or a bit the meat. Аватар короля, я, по-моему, его дропнул. Потому что количество визжащих баб там ебет уши уже на нулевой, так сказать. По-моему. Возможно, путаюсь с чем-то другим. Ну и плюс это... Я так ненавижу сетап, где какой-то охуительный японец-амешка переносится в игры или живет игрой, или, блядь, я вообще охуел. А, это где киберспорт какой-то, и там типа челик из киберспортивной команды что-то сидит в клубешнике, что-то пердит. Не знаю, я короче, по-моему, не то и то дропнул, короче. Это, по-моему, я про повелителя до этого рассказывал, Оверлорд, или как так называется. Где визжащие бабы прислуживают, и что-то какая-то хуета, короче. Но Блич пока что 10 из 10. Ничего пока нового не могу сказать по поводу аниме. Все еще смотрю Блича. У меня там 160-я какая-то серия. Тупо десятка. Тупо охуенный 15-летний Блич. Ребенок акселерат. Бегает с огромной елдой. Это кайф. Большего я не прошу, большего мне и не надо. Плюс там крутой дизайн пустых аранкаров, банкаев, синкаев, дзампакта, хуйката, бля, и так далее. Есть стиль. Я просто умру. Шалкер впадает.
Turn back, turn back from this cave. You said, let me prove that I'm brave, let me keep going. But the cave goes for miles and miles and miles, and you're so tired, but I know that you're strong, so turn back,
Там Хесус был написан.
turn back.
Жесть. Он груженый, перекрытый. Но крутая игрушка. Наверное, ее хотелось бы посоветовать каждому. Но я бы даже не назвал это игрой. Я все думал, типа, описать ее как шоу-кейс какой-то. Но я просто хуй знает, что это. Арсению бы посоветовал. Но мне кажется, Арсений приметил на самом деле. Он прикрыл это за шутками, но приметил. Да каждому. Так вот в одиночестве пройти ее, понять, что с тебя жестко зарофлили и попуститься просто. Тут еще интересный вопрос, что почему-то люди, общаясь с кем-то, они постоянно думают о том, что те люди, с кем они общаются, хотят, чтобы они как-то реагировали, чтобы они делали какие-то выводы, чтобы они как-то оценивали, чтобы они как-то там помогали. Но иногда это просто не так. Иногда людям в ответ нихуя просто не надо от тебя.